There's a new book out called No Bosses, A New Economy for a Better World. It's a good title, right? Sounds great. Those of us who've had bosses before know what that's like. We don't always like being told what to do. Sometimes what they say doesn't make any sense. And sometimes we're like, well, we don't want to say this. We don't want to do this either, but we kind of have to because of my boss. They have to do it because of their boss. And you can see where the breakdown happens, right? It's pretty obvious. We go through it all the time. And the author, Michael Albert, was on the Nomiki Konst show recently. I saw that interview. I'll put a link to that video in the description. I highly recommend everybody looks at it. It's a very informative, and if I do say so myself, very inspirational interview. It's something that we don't talk about a lot in left-wing circles, or really just in any circles, because the traditional structure of our economic system has always just been accepted as gospel. You know, you could go all the way back throughout capitalism's history. There's always been this understanding that there always has to be a figurehead, right? A boss, an owner, an emperor, a king, a lord, whatever you want to call this person. Somebody who rules and makes decisions and everybody else just toils for them. And yet this is something that working class people really yearn to be released from. And it's what this book deals with, No Bosses. It basically shows you how a non-hierarchical economy, what he calls a participatory economy, looks like, how it can work. And he gives examples. You watch the video and you'll see, but I'm paraphrasing when I say this part. He goes over some examples in Argentina about how they tried this at one point. Some of the capitalists didn't see any profit in what they were doing and they left. And the workers were left there and they just took up the responsibility of where they worked. And unfortunately, it was kind of like everybody was kind of lost in the woods for a long time. They didn't know what to do, and it kind of failed. But again, it's because it's all they knew. This hierarchical structure, taking orders from a higher up, was all they knew. And in my approach to democratizing the economy, I will admit I have left this in place as well. So I guess that makes me more of a reformist rather than someone who advocates for radical change. And I understand, of course, radical change is needed. And Nomiki points this out in the very beginning. He says we need radical solutions and we need them fast. Well, everybody in the United States, at least, just tends to go, whoa, 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 whoa. That's too fast. Well, slow down there, Speedy. We gotta go slow. We're kind of scared of change. We want it big time, but we're so scared of it, we don't want to really do it. Come on, do you really want it? How bad do you want it? That's the thing. Because if we don't move fast, we all know it's coming with climate change, right? It's going to be the apocalypse. We're going to be living in like Mad Max, Blade Runner, Waterworld type situation, and oh boy, then only the strong will survive. Do we really want to let it get to that point just because we're scared of trying to move forward in a fast yet very calculated, very productive, and positive way? This isn't a decision that people have to face in their life for the most part, but we are in that situation, and we have to rise to the challenge if we as a human race, never mind a country, are going to survive. But this is a very interesting concept, and I'm honestly thinking about getting this book and reading it, and I'm not much of a reader. But he basically goes over how bosses aren't actually necessary, and we really should not have one individual or a small group of people who preside over a mass of others owning and dictating the circumstances of the means by which we live, by owning the means by which we exist. Like, let's say you had somebody who grows, has an apple orchard, okay? It's food, right? Everybody needs food to live. Now, the argument you might hear from some other people is, well, a private owner and you don't like that, you can try to go find some other place that has, cherries or pears or some kind of squash, Or if you don't want that, you still say, well, why don't you just go ahead and change your diet and grow your own vegetables? Well, that actually is a feasible idea, but not to the degree that it would have to be to make that whole kind of system work, because not every piece of soil that we have is ideal for farming, especially when we consider how vegetation is disappearing because of climate change. So we really need to start getting into more hydroponics, and that's our story for another time now. But we really should not be allowing private ownership and capitalism and the profit motive to dictate the means by which we have to survive. That really is one of the worst things that we've allowed to happen in our society, not just in the United States, but everywhere. And some people will tell you, well, if you don't have that, then people are going to be killing each other left and right. You need that one strong figure to go, stop fighting. You will do this. You will do that. It must be done this way. Go do it. No, you don't need that. Most people, if given the option of cooperation over chaos, they'll choose cooperation. So you really need to you really need to change the structure of jobs. And Albert goes over this in his book, where he says that you have to basically change the nature of the job. Like, let's say you're somebody at Walmart who runs the cash register. Well, what do you do every day? You go in, you punch a clock, you do what your boss tells you, you get paid shit wages, and you go home and you have to get food stamps to live, right? That's your life at that point. Well, without bosses, if it were a more democratic place like he's suggesting, then Walmart would be run by the workers, and they would be democratically deciding how to structure the jobs as well. So if you're somebody who runs a cash register in a traditional setting, you switch over to that setting, you're not just running a cash register, you're a lot more involved in the whole process because you're democratically deciding where the company goes. With all your other workers, from the janitor to the sales department people, to the people in the back who unload the trucks and stock the shelf, all those people are equal parts in the democratic process here. So there is an incentive to really put your all into that job because it is yours. It is yours. You are responsible for everything. You have the say over how that job impacts the company. So knowing that, when you meet up with your fellow workers and you go, okay, when we make all these profits, how are we going to distribute them? That is definitely where people need to get democratic, because if you just allow one person or a small group of board members to determine where the profits of your labor go, you're not going to see hardly any of it, comparatively speaking. You could generate, like, I don't know, let's say $50 billion in profit, all right? But you're only going to see, if you're lucky, maybe 1 billion of it. That's the danger you run when you have a hierarchical structure where all the power is concentrated at the top. It's slightly different, though, when you have a hierarchical setting that is more bottom. The power is supposed to be at the bottom, more like a representative democracy and republic setting, kind of like what we're supposed to have. That said, there's still the potential for them to try to siphon that power up to their own offices. And that's why he says, we got to get rid of this pyramid mindset when it comes to the workplace and it comes to the economy in general. It has to be more, I guess, a little bit more ambiguous in the description of a job. Like, you may be a cashier, you may be a department person, you might be a programmer or something like that, but you would have knowledge of the company. You would be able to do other things within that company. Let's say you run out of a job to do. You don't need to do it. Well, okay, maybe your job's done. Instead of getting fired, okay, for instance, well, what else can we do with you? What else can we move you over towards? What would you like to do in the company? Okay, well, let's sit down and talk about it, and then we'll move you over here. That kind of situation, So it's almost, in a similar respect, it would be like a company saying, you're not really working out in this job. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. Instead of just throwing them out in the cold with nothing, especially in today's climate, what you would do is, okay, you're not working out in this job, so where would you like to go? Here are a list of job openings with other companies, or even in our own company. Where would you like to go? What looks like it fits you best? And you sit down and talk about it, and then the worker decides, okay, it looks like this is good for me here. Okay, great. Well, you and I will talk to the employer, and we'll try to get you the job there, and we'll basically kind of shuttle you over there, and you're not fired necessarily. You're transferred into a different job that works better for you. You're still getting paid. You have security. They used to do this in the Soviet Union back in the day. Now, granted, it was state-run. What I'm talking about is more in the private sector. We all know that 100% state control is bad news, but so is 100% private control. And that said, it is great that it's good that we should have uh, a more democratic say in how our tax dollars are allocated, where we want to spend our taxes, what we want to spend them, if we want to spend them, that kind of thing. I think, but that's a story for another time as well. We're getting sidetracked here. So, a world without bosses, honestly, it's a long way off, I think, but realistically, some people may want bosses, so we can't just assume that if this does take hold somewhere, that it's going to spread like wildfire all across the world. It won't, because you're always going to have people who just want a traditional system, and you're always going to have others who want something a little different, like maybe 100% independence. And I always say that's fine. That's why I support things like UBI, because you're going to need money to get whatever your idea is off the ground. Like, let's say you want to start doing caricatures on a boardwalk, or you want to start up a band, okay? I think that's totally fine. In fact, I would say one of the most underrepresented forms of a worker co-op are bands, musical bands. We see it all the time. When you get bureaucracy involved in a situation like that, when they have to go to promoters and record companies and stuff, then it starts getting crazy. It's like, okay, now we want you to do this. And the band's like, what? The Beatles ran into this years ago with Sir George Martin. And then when they fired him and they found their own path, they did their own thing. So there are examples of how co-ops, small co-ops, can actually be a model for bigger co-ops. But I highly recommend everybody check this book out. I'm definitely considering it myself. So I'm going to put the link in the description below. I really think this is something we should be talking about a lot more instead of just looking towards reforming. And on final note on that, we will have to start recognizing there is a big difference between change and reform, like systemic radical change and reforming, which keeps the basis for the current system in place. That's what needs to change overall, which is why we all need to be focusing on radical change rather than just reform, because reform is just like hitting reset on a game console. Okay? The system and the console is there. You're going to run into the same problems again. That's not what we want here. We need radical change. So, something to think about. Check the book out, please. And I'll be back on later on.